Great, lovely. So I'll just introduce myself. So my name's Hannah. I work for Carers Northumberland. We're a charity based in Northumberland, and we support unpaid carers across the county. Um, we're quite a small team, but we do have an adult carer service and a young carer service. And today we're going to look in a bit more detail about, who carers are, what they need, and a bit more about Carers Northumberland itself and what we can offer. Right, so we're going to look first at the definition of a carer. So a carer is someone who looks after a family member, partner or friend who needs help because they are ill, frail or have a disability. So a really important sort of thing to say today is we are talking about unpaid carers. So that is people who support, it's not part of their employment, it is purely they're helping someone they know. Carers come in all shapes and sizes. It could be a wife caring for a husband caring for his wife, parents caring for an adult child, maybe who has some additional needs. It could be an adult child caring for one of their parents. And quite often it is people mutually caring. So it might be an older couple who support each other in different ways. So while we say unpaid carer, some carers are eligible for carers allowance. They would still be classified as unpaid. Not all carers do receive carers allowance. They are not all eligible. The eligibility criteria are quite strict. So the eligibility would be that someone is 16 or over, that the person they care for receives a qualifying disability benefit. So that would be DLA, PIP, or attendance allowance. They must care for at least 35 hours a week for that person, and their earnings would have to be £132 a week or less after tax, national insurance, and expenses. We just always like to really say that even if a carer isn't receiving carers allowance, that does not mean that their caring role isn't significant. A lot of people aren't eligible, and really sort of in our eyes that whether they're claiming the carers allowance or not is irrelevant to the impact of their caring role. So there are also, this is something which has been going on for a long time, but a lot of people might not be aware of. You can also be a parent carer. So a parent carer is an adult who is caring for a child who they have parental responsibility over who has additional needs. So that could be a child with a disability, an illness, or some special educational needs. And then we also get onto young carers. So young carers are children and young people, so anyone under the age of 18 who provide or intend to provide unpaid care to another person, which would normally be undertaken by an adult. So just to say, there are a lot of different types of caring. I think a lot of people, when you say carers, they just think of sort of the personal care. So people think, helping someone get washed, dressed, helping them use the toilet, helping them with the mobility. And that certainly is a big part of caring. But there's a lot of other things that people don't really realise. So emotional support, meeting the needs of that person, is something that is recognised as a really important part of a caring role. Also household tasks, helping someone run a home, cooking, cleaning, doing their shopping, and organisational tasks. This is one of the main ones we find people think, oh, I'm just helping out. But actually, making appointments, escorting someone to appointments, speaking to professionals on their behalf, managing their finances. It's all really important things. And if that person could not do that without your support, you are providing care for them. So care looks very different in lots of circumstances. It could be someone who looks in on someone once a day, or it could be someone providing intensive 24-hour support. It could be short term. For example, someone recovering from an illness or injury, maybe someone's had a fall and broken their hip, they've been in hospital and they just need, a few weeks of extra support to get them back on their feet. It could be sporadic. So, caring for someone with a long-term mental illness who maybe, can be doing really well for a few years and then have a bit of a rough patch and will need some extra care and support for a few months. And that's something that happens every so often. And it could also be long-term. So that could be, for example, caring for someone with dementia, whose condition will progressively become worse and they will need more support sort of as you go on. So what effects does this have on a carer? The impact of caring can be absolutely huge. And this is something that often isn't really taken into consideration. I think a lot of people think about the person they care for and not necessarily about the person providing that care. Poor physical health is a very common thing that happens with carers. Caring can really take its toll on someone's health and well-being, and often the carer themselves ignores this. They're quite often the mentality we find a lot of people have is, if the person I'm looking after is fine, I'm fine. And that they're so busy with looking after the other person, making sure that they're safe, they're well fed, they're taken to their appointments, they're taking their medication. They don't really have time to think about themselves often. And it can be difficult things like, we all know how tricky it can be to get a GP's appointment, but say, having to escort someone with you who you're caring for can make it even more difficult. And statistically, carers are much less likely to make a GP appointment. Emotionally and sort of well-being and mental health wise, as I said, carers do tend to sort of, say they get their head down and get on with it. And it can be really difficult for them to sort of stop and think of themselves and take care of their own well-being. And carers are at a disproportionate risk of mental health issues, including anxiety and depression. And going on to the next one of the big causes of this can be social isolation. Caring can really affect someone's ability to sort of make and maintain friendships, particularly if your caring role is quite a large role. It takes up a lot of your time. You just don't have the time available anymore, unfortunately. Caring can also make it really unpredictable. You don't know whether the person you're caring for will have a good day, whether they'll have a bad day. They might have appointments that crop up. So it can be really, really difficult for carers to plan in advance. And I think often they don't really want to sort of let people know maybe that they're struggling, or say, I can't be very flexible. So they do often avoid sort of making those plans, unfortunately. And another impact of caring is difficulty with employment. It can be really, really difficult to work, particularly full time. When you have a caring role, caring can take up a huge amount of your time. You might have to escort someone to hospital appointments, treatments. They might need to be supervised. They might need care, at certain points of the day, or to have someone with them all the time. And that does often mean that carers might need to leave employment or take sick leave from work. And this is something that can be really difficult, and it's very, very common, we do find, among carers. So we'll go on now a little bit onto young carers. So being a young carer can really have a detrimental effect on young people. We've got some statistics here that I think a lot of people might find quite surprising. So 1 in 12 young carers provide more than 15 hours care per week, which is really quite a responsibility for an under 18. 1 in 20 will miss school due to their caring responsibilities. And this means, well, it's one of the reasons why they have significantly lower educational attainment. And they're also much less likely than the average, much more likely to not be in education when they're sort of 16 to 18. And as it says there, more likely to have special educational needs or a long-standing illness or disability themselves. So now we've heard a bit about carers, we're going to have to think about, how much do you think carers save the NHS? So we're looking at sort of, in a year, how much do people think they save? I know we can't really chat on here, but if you just have a little think and think, what do you think, having heard everything? So the 2021 census showed that carers in England and Wales save the UK economy £162 billion per year. And actually, that would fund the NHS again in its entirety for 1 year. So any carers out there are saving an equivalent of the NHS. And I think caring is often overlooked. It's something that, people don't really talk about, people don't really think about. I think there's not a lot of acknowledgement for, that just shows the amount of time and hours that people are putting in, and it is often unacknowledged. Just to say as well that the 2021 census recorded 5 million carers in England and Wales. However, we do believe that that figure is considerably lower than it actually is. Carers UK believe that's only about half the amount. So because the census took place during lockdown. I believe the way they phrased the question that year was whether you left the house to visit someone who needed your care. Obviously, you know, with the lockdown requirements, people not being allowed to leave the house, a lot of people had sort of later stated that they didn't feel comfortable saying that. They were worried they would be in trouble. So really, the number is almost certainly higher than that. Right. So now we'll go on to look at locally. So carers in Northumberland. So that census recorded 31,000 people living in Northumberland were providing unpaid care to a family member or friend. So that's about 9.7% of the population of Northumberland. This does show a fall in numbers from the previous census in 2011, where it was about 11.4%. But again, we do believe that this number is actually lower than the real number. A lot of people don't identify themselves as carers. A lot of people consider themselves to just be, you know, it's just my husband, it's just my wife, I'm just being a good friend or a good daughter. And they don't necessarily see themselves as a carer. So it's almost certainly a higher number. So bearing in mind that it was just over 31,000 carers in Northumberland, how many are registered with us, Carers Northumberland? So we are, as I said before, a charity that support unpaid carers in their caring role. So it's 7,961 as of last week, which is, don't get me wrong, is a great number. But again, that's an awful lot of carers not accessing support. You know, that's less than a third of people who, you know, are caring in Northumberland, we believe. So, you know, it's a lot of people who are missing out, certainly. We're going to have a bit of a look now about what carers want. So we've got a series of very short videos. These have been recorded based on what we have found sort of regular feedback is from carers and some direct quotes from carers. But obviously, these have been recorded by other people to sort of protect their anonymity. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to play 4 very short videos and then we're going to have a bit of a chat about them.
When the social worker came round the house to do the assessment for my husband, she didn't really talk to me at all. I didn't feel included. She asked him lots of questions, but she didn't ask me how I felt about anything or the care I provided to my husband. I've looked after him for so many years. I felt a bit left out. I want to be included.
I don't want a medal. I want to look after Jane, but that doesn't mean it's not hard, that I haven't given up pieces of myself in becoming a carer. It's just nice to be seen, to be heard, to be recognised. I just want some recognition.
When my mum was diagnosed with dementia, it was such a blow. I was really worried. I just didn't know what to expect, what the future might hold. I just wanted honest information. I just wanted the right information. Really, I think I just wanted to be informed.
Honestly, I forget to look after myself sometimes. I think it's important that there are people out there to look after the carers as well. I want my health to matter. It's easy to feel left alone and like I don't matter as much as the person I'm looking after. Sometimes I just want to be asked how I am.
Right, so obviously just very short videos there, but I think, you know, they really sum up 4 of the big things that we have found in our sort of years of working with carers, of what it is that they want and sort of what they're lacking. So we're going to have a little talk about each one of those. So the first thing is to be included. So we always say, you know, someone comes to ask for help, but who is it that is asking you for that help? If you're a professional, it's something you need to be thinking about. It's quite often the carer who is asking and not the cared for. And that's a really big step for them to ask. You know, it can be quite an emotional thing and something that people have to build up to say, actually, I'm not managing, we're not managing, and I do need some help. And we just always ask people to consider, if you're a professional and you're out there and a carer comes forward and asks you for help, you know, please really consider what they're saying. If they get that door shut in their face, Are they likely to ask for support again? And what sort of impact is that going to have on their well-being and, their sort of caring role going forward, and, how they feel about trusting professionals. It's really important to sort of make sure they are listened to. Recognition. Caring is a choice. We think it's really, really important to remember that. It's carers' first right in law that they do not have to care. They do not have to provide that caring role. So they can say no. They can say no at any point to any aspect. And that's something that a lot of carers don't realise. They don't know that they have that choice. They think, well, it's my husband, it's my mum, it's whoever. It's my duty. I have to do it. There's no choice. But it's really important that they recognise that they can say no at any time and they will be supported with that. So the next one, to be informed. We always ask people, don't assume carers' knowledge of things. Caring doesn't come with instructions. For a lot of people, it's the first time they'll have ever dealt with something like benefits, social care, conditions moving and handling. And really, people don't know what they don't know. If you've never been in that world before, you don't have any experience, and you almost don't know what to ask for help with because it's not something you've ever come across before. Also, it could be sort of, you might think, well, they might be an expert in caring for that person, but it could be that something's happened overnight. Someone that they care for could have had a massive stroke, or equally, it could be something that is sort of a slow drip, sort of something like memory problems, dementia, mobility, where it starts quite mild and gets much worse. So it's important to make sure the person is offered information at every point. And finally, and this one's really important, I think this gets forgotten a lot. It's important to ask carers how they're doing. I think every appointment they go in, people will ask the person they care for, how are you? And sometimes they'll say to the carer, how is that person? And it's so rare that anyone asks them how they are. Our role at Carers Northumberland is to really try and look after the carer themselves. It's very rare that someone sort of asks about them. All the focus is on the cared for, and carer wellbeing should be just as much as the priority of the person who has the illness or disability. Right. So why are carers important? So particularly if you're a professional carer, you're sort of your partners in this. Their involvement, support and understanding really helps the cared for to respond better to treatment. And the welfare of the person being cared for will, to a large extent, really depend on how well the carer is doing. If the carer is unwell, they're not going to be able to provide care. And carers often have a lot more experience and knowledge about the person they look after than anyone else. They spend, an awful lot of time with them, and quite often they are the person to ask. Right, so how can you help? So say if you are a professional, you can support carers to get carers assessments, provide information on what they can expect from that assessment, let them know the next steps, try and identify carers. We will look at how to refer into services a little bit later on. One thing as well that we do like to mention is that the label of carer versus care worker is really important definition to make. Carers are unpaid people providing support to friends and family. Care workers are people in employment who are paid to provide that sort of care. I think during COVID, the clap for carers sort of movement, while it was a lovely idea, obviously people were clapping for care workers. And that had a big impact on the recognition of carers in general. And I think, it's a very important definition to make, that it is unpaid carers. And when you're discussing other people, it does need to be care workers if they are paid. Right, so now we're going to move on to Carers Northumberland, what we can offer and how we can help. So we have a fully trained team who can provide free and impartial information on things like carers' rights and welfare rights, Care Act, Families and Children Act, legal information, and rights in social care. I feel like seeing that list doesn't really give you a sort of much of an overview of what we actually do day to day. So we will be going through all the different services in a little bit more detail, and it gives you more of an idea of what we can actually help with. So as a team, we can help with benefits and grants. So benefits and grants currently is about a third of our workload. And this is very much due to the cost of living crisis. Previous to this sort of change, the numbers were very, very different, and we will look at that. So things we can offer, benefit checks. So any carer registered with us can access a benefit check. These are very quick. We usually do them over the phone and they take about 15 minutes. And we can sort of look at either the carer in their household or the person they're caring for in their household and just see, are they claiming everything they're eligible for? And if not, we can help them out, to show them how to apply. We can also help applying for certain benefits. So we can help applying for carers allowance and also attendance allowance. Attendance allowance is very popular, one of our services. We can support people with filling in the form. We usually do phone appointments for anyone who has completed one. They are quite a long form, but it's something that our advisors have a lot of experience with and a very good success rate. We have a lot of knowledge around sort of that benefit. So it's certainly something we can support with. We also have something called our Carer Support Fund. So this is a little fund that carers of adults, so over 18s, can access once a year. It is funded by Adult Social Care. It's not in any way means tested, and it's something carers can use to take a break from their caring role. So it can be spent on things like holidays, nights away, theatre trips, but equally, a lot of carers aren't able to get away. So anything that helps them take a break. So a lot of people use it for things like craft equipment, exercise classes, Kindles, things like that. Anything that just gives them a little bit of a break from their caring role. And equally, we also have the Young Carer Support Fund, which is very similar, but for under 18s. We also currently have access to the Household Support Fund, which is a government grant to support people on a low income with essentials. So that can be things like gas and electricity, food vouchers, and replacement of essential household items. So things like white goods, fridges, ovens, mattresses, things like that. And currently we do have a pilot for Parent Carer Support Fund, which is very much like the Carer Support Fund that I mentioned earlier, but specifically targeted at parent carers. So just to say, in the last financial year, our team supported carers in accessing over £400,000 in benefit gains and nearly £50,000 in one-off grants. So just to sort of show you, that's something that's really, really changed over the last few years. So for example, 2022 to 23, it was more like £250,000, and 2021 to 2022, it was only £27,000. This is because our services are reactionary and we really try to sort of support with what carers are asking us for at the time. And with the recent cost of living crisis, a lot of carers are really struggling financially. So we have really focused in on the benefits, and that's something people have found really, really beneficial. We also like to think, it's money back into the local economy. We are supporting carers, but it also does support Northumberland as a whole. People are using this money to pay for local services and things, and I think it's a really important thing. We can also support with advanced planning. So we give impartial advice, and one of our very popular services is supporting with lasting power of attorney form. So we can support carers to make lasting powers of attorney for themselves and for the person they care for. Our service is completely free. We can support people with understanding how it works. We can support them with form filling and then sort of checking signatures and things and making sure everything is signed off and registered appropriately. Another service that we have is emergency care planning. So we do have some templates available that we can either send to carers or fill in with them, where they can just put some information about themselves and the person they care for. So things like what medications the person might take, who the next of kin are, any sort of important contacts, and important information so that if, for example, something were to happen to the carer, they became unwell or had an accident or were not able to get home or in touch for any reason, they just have a little bit of peace of mind knowing that piece of information is available. And we have had carers say that they have used this, say, for example, they've become unwell, and it is reassuring sort of knowing that everything is there in one place, and at least for a short period of time, someone would be able to step in and use that information while they weren't there. So travel and transport, this is another thing that we can help with. So one of the big things we do at the moment is we support people with applying for blue badges. I think a lot of people assume that blue badges are only for people with poor mobility, and that's something we've been doing a lot of work with people around, because it's also very useful for people who could be at risk around cars and traffic. So we do fill in a lot of these forms for people with dementia. We can also support with things like bus passes and concessionary travel. So we can support people to apply for disabled bus passes and companion passes for the carer, so that they would be able to travel free of charge with the person who required their support. And again, we can also help with things like planning journeys. So some people need support from us with things like planning bus routes to get to different events or to get to appointments. And other people, quite often if people are going on longer journeys, we can support them sort of using different websites to plan a journey where they would be able to access things like disabled toilets along the way. We would support them in getting radar keys and pinpointing where, for example, changing places toilets were, or accessible disabled toilets. And it just takes a little bit of the weight off people's mind, and I think it makes it a little bit easier for people to do things like planning holidays. And that's something we're very happy to support with. Housing. So we can support with things like housing options, with moving at priority groups on Home Finder. So we have had quite a few carers get in touch and say, that we're really struggling with that, and that's something we can certainly speak to the council on their behalf and provide letters of support stating that they are carers. We can advise on things like who to contact about aids and adaptations and disabled facilities grants. Helping with energy arrears, as I said, we do have our household support fund at the moment, which we can use to sort of support people with that, and support with things like warm home discounts and priority registers as well. One of the main things, the sort of work we do, is supporting carers with social care. We try to be a bridge between social care and carers, trying to sort of remove any barriers to people accessing, appropriate care and services for themselves and the person that they're caring for. I think it can be quite daunting for people sometimes to speak to adult social care. It might be that they've never been involved with them before, they don't know where to start, they're worried about what might happen, or it might be that they're struggling to communicate with someone. Maybe someone already has a care manager, but they're struggling to get in touch, they don't feel like they're on the same page. And we're certainly very happy to sort of act as a bit of a liaison for people, and help things go a little bit more smoothly. So things that we're very frequently support with are things like accessing respite. So we support carers with the sort of the knowledge that they have a right to some respite. We can help people to get assessed. We can sort of refer them into adult social care. We also are very happy to refer people in for care needs assessments and carers assessments. And if people are having any issues with this, they've had the outcome of it and they're unsure about the carers assessment, we're certainly very happy to talk to them and the care manager regarding that. We are happy to talk to people about how financial assessments work, what to expect, what sort of information will be required from them. And also things like how to find home care, whether that be through adult social care or people are wanting to do that privately. We can give people a bit more of an idea of where they can find it and sort of what to expect, just to try and take some of the mystery out of it, really, because I think, again, adult social care is something where if you've never been involved with it, you don't really know. So we do try and make things a little bit more clear for people. Community, we try to be very active in our local community. So that is both with carers and with professionals and other organisations. I think it's really important that we're sort of out and about with everyone out in Northumberland. So for carers, we do have carer groups. So these are groups which happen on a monthly basis all over the county. So for example, we have them in sort of Berwick, Hexham, Ponteland, Blythe, Cramlington, lots of different places. And carers can meet up in a confidential environment, and have a cup of tea. It's very informal, and there's always a volunteer or member of staff at all of these groups. So should people need a bit more support or information, they can come to us. It's a familiar face, and a lot of people make really good friends at these groups. They share tips, and a lot of people who maybe are no longer caring for whatever reason keep coming along because they feel that they have something to offer. Whether it be advice or just sort of support going forward for people, and they're really, really friendly groups. We also have our own events, so that's things like meals, walks, cinema clubs. We do an annual trip to Beamish, and these are events where everyone's welcome. So a lot of people bring the person they care for, they bring friends, family. Beamish, we have people bring generations of their family along. But it's lovely, as we said before, carers do become very socially isolated often. And whether that's, it's difficult for them to get out, the caring role be quite sort of unpredictable. And it could also be, sometimes people feel maybe a little bit embarrassed by the caring role. They feel the person they care for maybe has, an invisible disability, and they might feel embarrassed if something were to happen. And I think often people feel a little bit more comfortable that everyone there is in the same situation. They can ask for help if they need it. And they're really lovely things, and they're very well attended, I have to say. So for professionals, we also do a lot of information stalls and community events, where we try and get out and sort of spread the word about Carers Northumberland and carers in general, and try and get people involved and to find out a bit more about us. We're happy to go along to things like flu clinics as well. We also currently are piloting some outreach where we go out into the community to meet carers who maybe would struggle a little bit over the phone. That's been very successful. That's something that we're looking at continuing, certainly. And also at the moment, we're doing memory groups. So we're working with Northumberland Memory Service, and attending when people are diagnosed with dementia and they're invited along to memory groups with their carer. We do attend one of those groups just to sort of go in and support the carer. And that's been something that's been really, really worthwhile, I think. So training, we also run a program of training and workshops, and these are for professionals, carers, and the local community. So just some of the things we have on offer. So care awareness training, very much like we're doing today. We're very happy to come to people's workplaces, do this over the Zoom, and it's something that's often picked up by GP surgeries, social care, charities and other organisations. It's completely free. We're very happy to tailor it to the service you provide. And similarly, we have young carer awareness training as well, which can be delivered in schools and in other places with young people. And it's something that, can be really, really useful. We have our Recognised School Award as well. Karen is one of our young carer workers, and she's been doing some absolutely amazing work getting schools involved, and making sure that they're, providing as much support as they can to young carers. For carers themselves, we do have carer workshops. So these sort of fall into two categories. We do quite practical workshops. So for example, we've got one coming up that looks at paying for social care, where we'll look at, how financial assessments work and things like that. We have workshops on carer rights, advanced planning, power of attorney, things like that. But we also look at the emotional side of caring. So workshops about how to manage stress and guilt. Guilt is something that's very, very common among carers. And quite often these sessions we'll tie in with wellbeing. So we do have a scheme of carer wellbeing sessions where we talk for a little while about, taking care of yourself and, the carer being the priority. And we look at easy ways to manage your own wellbeing. And we try to tie these in with a different activity every time that would promote well-being. So for example, we've had someone in to teach Tai Chi, we've done drumming, I believe we're going to do some sort of forest school type wellness things. They're just absolutely lovely sessions, and that's certainly something that we would like to continue. Right, so finally we're going to move on to young carers. So as I said, we do support adults and young carers, so young carers being the under 18s. So our young carer service can support with things like their initial assessments for young carers are quite different. Adults are very welcome just to register. Young carers, they do go through sort of an assessment and wellbeing check just to check that, that child is getting the support they need. Our team provide whole family support and also one-to-one sessions in schools. There is the Young Carer Support Fund, access to grants, and they have an absolutely amazing activity calendar for the young carers, which are very popular. And that includes in-person activities, so things like they go to Airbox Bounce, they go to the pantomime, farms, they go on shopping trips, but also online things for young carers who maybe can't get out. So things like crafts, cooking sessions, quizzes, book clubs. And a lot of their activities also have transport, which I think, a lot of the young carers wouldn't be able to attend without that. And it's a really, really good service, I would say. Right, so that is sort of the end of the training. I'll just quickly sort of advise how people can refer to us. So professionals, the best way to refer is on our website. So the links are on there, and obviously everyone will be sent this out afterwards. It's very straightforward making a referral. If the person would prefer to refer themselves or speak to us directly, all the links are on there. You can also refer via Frontline now, and we do pick those up very quickly. If you would prefer to speak to us on the phone, you have any questions, you're very welcome to ring. We're open Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And carers themselves, if they want to register or have any questions, again, you can go on our website or call into the office. Lovely. That's everything. Helen, if I can hand back over to you.